Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel Aurora and stared at the readings on his display. Something was wrong with the numbers. Deep in the Kepler belt, buried beneath 300 years of ice and cosmic dust, something massive had just turned on. The energy readings made no sense. Nothing that big should be out here. Nothing human had ever been built in this region of space. Lieutenant Amy Carter looked up from her console with wide eyes. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls as she tried to make sense of what the sensors were telling them. Whatever was down there beneath all that ice was bigger than anything humanity had ever constructed. It was bigger than their largest military ships. It was bigger than the orbital stations around Earth. It was bigger than anything the Galactic Council said humans were allowed to build. Commander Lucas Bennett moved closer to the main view screen. The readings showed metal compositions in the buried object. He ran the analysis 3 times to be sure. The results came back the same each time. This thing was made by humans. The chemical signatures matched Earth manufacturing processes. But according to every historical record in the human database, nothing this size had ever been built before humanity joined the Galactic Council. And after joining the Council, humans had agreed to strict limits on military construction. Whatever lay beneath that ice should not exist. Jake made his decision quickly. He ordered the crew to begin excavation procedures. He also told Amy to keep all communications on a closed channel. Nobody outside the Aurora needed to know what they had found. Not yet. Not until they understood what they were dealing with. The Galactic Council had rules about unauthorized military development. Breaking those rules could have serious consequences for all of humanity. The excavation took 72 hours of continuous work. The crew worked in shifts around the clock. They used cutting lasers to slice through the ice. They used gravity pullers to move the massive chunks of frozen debris. Slowly, piece by piece, they revealed what had been hidden for 3 centuries. The ship that emerged made even the oldest crew members stop their work and stare. The vessel was enormous. Jake estimated it was 5 times the size of Earth's largest dreadnought. The hull showed no signs of damage despite being buried for 300 years. The metal was pristine and unmarked. Along the sides of the ship, Jake could see launch bays that could hold hundreds of smaller fighter craft. Weapon ports lined the hull in neat rows. Each port was bigger than the main guns on current Earth military vessels. The engines at the rear of the ship looked powerful enough to tear holes in the fabric of space itself. Amy found an access port on the side of the hull. The design was human but very old. The encryption protecting the access codes was unlike anything in current use. She worked for hours trying to crack the security system. Jake watched her work and wondered who had built this ship. More importantly, he wondered why they had hidden it out here in the frozen depths of space. When Amy finally broke through the encryption, the ship responded immediately. Lights began turning on across the enormous hull. The ship's computer systems came online after 300 years of silence. Data began streaming into the Aurora's computers. Jake opened the first file and felt his heart beat faster. The file was a personal log. The date stamp showed it had been recorded exactly 300 years ago in the year 2187. A woman appeared on the screen. She wore a military uniform that Jake did not recognize. The design was human, but from an era before the current Earth Defense Force had been established. The woman had stern features and hard eyes. She looked directly into the camera as she began to speak. Her name was Colonel Patricia Hayes. She explained that the ship was called the USS Defiance. She said it was humanity's insurance policy. She and a secret group of officers and scientists had built the ship using resources and technology they were not supposed to have. They had built it because they knew the truth about the galaxy. They knew things about the Galactic Council that the Council did not want younger species to discover. Patricia explained that in 60 days from when she made the recording, the Council would officially designate humanity as a protected species. The Council would tell humans this was an honor. They would say Earth was being welcomed into galactic civilization. But Patricia said this was a lie. She had discovered something terrible about protected species status. In 12,000 years of Galactic Council history, no protected species had ever graduated to full membership. Not one. The Council claimed this was because younger species needed time to develop properly. But Patricia had found evidence that suggested something much darker. The Council kept younger species dependent on purpose. They controlled access to technology. They controlled which star systems protected species could colonize. They controlled everything about the future of species like humanity. Patricia had uncovered something even worse. She had found records buried deep in Council databases, records the Council thought were secure and hidden. These records showed what happened when a protected species became too advanced or too independent. When a species started developing technology that rivaled the Council's founding races, that species would face elimination. Sometimes it was direct military action. Sometimes it was economic manipulation. Sometimes it was assassination of key scientists and leaders. But the result was always the same. The species would either be destroyed completely or reduced to permanent insignificance. Patricia listed examples. The Zentari had developed breakthrough quantum computing technology. Then all 7 of their lead scientists died in what was officially ruled an accident. The Krolesh began expanding their military too quickly. Then their economy mysteriously collapsed due to market forces that analysis showed were artificially created. The Viridians refused to share an advanced weapons discovery with the Council. Their entire fleet vanished during what should have been a routine patrol. 17 species total had reached humanity's level of development. All 17 had been stopped from advancing further. The Defiance was Patricia's answer to this threat. The ship had been built using technology reverse-engineered from 6 different Council species. Patricia's team had taken weapon systems from the Valorians. They had copied shield generators from the Krill. They had studied propulsion systems from the Nexari. Then they had improved everything. They had integrated all these different technologies in ways the Council species had never imagined. The result was a ship that could fight an entire fleet by itself. But Patricia said the Defiance was more than just a weapon. It represented something more important. It represented humanity's refusal to accept limits placed on them by others. It represented the human spirit that had survived ice ages and world wars and every disaster Earth had ever faced. Patricia and her team had committed treason under Council law. They had built weapons humanity was forbidden to possess, but they had done it to give future generations a choice. Patricia's message ended with a direct challenge to whoever found the ship. She said they would face a choice. They could accept humanity's place as permanent children under Council rule, or they could stand up and show the galaxy what humans were truly capable of becoming. She said to choose wisely because the entire universe would be watching the decision. The recording ended and Jake found himself staring at a black screen. Around him on the Aurora's bridge, his crew sat in complete silence. Nobody spoke for a long moment. The implications of what they had just heard were staggering. Amy's voice broke the silence. She reported that there were thousands more log files in the ship's database. Tactical information, weapon specifications, training protocols, engine schematics, medical procedures. Everything needed to operate the massive vessel. Whoever had built the Defiance had planned for every possible scenario. They had left nothing to chance. Jake stood and straightened his uniform. He ordered Amy to send a secure transmission back to Earth. Priority 1 classification. Eyes only for the President of Earth. The message would be simple. They had found something that changed everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the galaxy. Through the view screen of the Aurora, the Defiance hung in space like a sleeping giant. 300 years it had waited in the frozen darkness. 300 years it had kept Patricia Hayes' secret. Now that secret was revealed. Jake wondered what would happen when this giant finally woke up. He wondered if humanity was ready for the consequences of the choice Patricia had left for them. The universe was about to find out what humans did when they were pushed into a corner. Admiral Christine Palmer read the report for the 4th time and still could not believe what she was seeing. As Earth's highest-ranking military officer and humanity's representative to the Galactic Council, she had spent 20 years walking a careful line between human ambition and Council restrictions. Now that careful balance was about to collapse completely. The report from Captain Morrison and the Aurora crew described a ship that should not exist. More than that, it described a conspiracy that had been hidden for 300 years. A conspiracy that suggested everything humanity believed about the Galactic Council might be a lie. Christine sat alone in her office on the Earth Defense Orbital Station. Outside her window, she could see Earth turning slowly in the darkness of space. That blue and green planet held 8 billion human lives. Those lives depended on the decisions she would make in the next few hours. She touched the communication panel and opened a secure channel to the Aurora. Jake Morrison's face appeared on her screen. He looked tired but alert. Christine asked him to confirm that the ship was operational. Jake nodded and explained that they had run complete diagnostic tests on all major systems. The Defiance was not just operational. It was ready for immediate deployment. The technology was at least 50 years ahead of anything currently in the Earth Defense Fleet. Whoever had built this ship had possessed knowledge that humanity supposedly did not have access to until much later. Christine felt a headache building behind her eyes. She asked Jake if anyone else knew about the discovery. He assured her that only the Aurora crew had seen the ship. They had maintained complete communication silence as ordered, but he warned that they could not keep this secret for long. Something this big would eventually be detected by Council monitoring systems. They had a small window of time to decide what to do. Christine pulled up the files that Jake had transmitted. She spent the next 12 hours reading through everything. Patricia Hayes had been thorough in her documentation. She had compiled evidence from dozens of different sources, financial records showing unusual monetary flows before protected species suffered economic collapses, communication intercepts showing Council officials discussing species that needed to be controlled, autopsy reports on scientists whose deaths had been ruled accidental, but showed signs of sophisticated poisoning, sensor logs showing military ships in locations they had no official reason to be. The pattern was undeniable once you knew to look for it. 17 times in recorded history, a protected species had shown signs of becoming too advanced. 17 times something had happened to stop that advancement. The methods varied, but the results were always the same. The species would either disappear entirely or would stagnate at a level that posed no threat to the Council's established power structure. Christine cross-referenced Patricia's research with the official Council historical databases. Everything matched. The Zentari had indeed lost their top quantum computing scientists in an accident. The official report blamed faulty equipment, but Patricia had found evidence that the equipment had been sabotaged. The Kralesh economic collapse had officially been caused by poor financial planning, but Patricia had traced the manipulation back to 3 different Council banking institutions. The Viridians had vanished during a patrol in an empty sector of space. Patricia had found debris patterns suggesting weapons fire, not the navigation failure listed in official reports. A message came through on Christine's personal channel. It was from the Council scheduling office. The Galactic Council was calling an emergency summit meeting in 3 days. The stated purpose was to announce new guidelines for protected species military development. Christine stared at that message and felt her blood run cold. The timing could not be coincidental. The Council knew something. Maybe not about the Defiance specifically, but they knew humanity was advancing too quickly. This summit was their move to lock Earth down before humans became too powerful to control. Christine made her decision. She sent orders to Jake to bring the Defiance back to Earth. She told him to use maximum stealth protocols and to stay hidden in the Kepler Belt's dust clouds as much as possible. She did not want the Council detecting the ship's movement. Then she called for an emergency meeting with the President and Earth's military leadership. If they were going to do this, everyone needed to be unified. 12 hours later, Christine stood in the White House Situation Room deep beneath the surface of Earth. President Linda Marsh sat at the head of the table. The Joint Chiefs of Staff filled the other seats. A holographic projection of the Defiance rotated slowly in the center of the table. The military leaders stared at it with expressions ranging from shock to excitement to fear. President Marsh asked for options. General Henry Cross spoke first. He commanded Earth defense and was responsible for protecting humanity's home system. He argued that they should hide the Defiance again, deny everything if the Council asked questions. Humanity was not ready for a direct confrontation with species that had been traveling through space for thousands of years. The smart move was to wait and build up their strength slowly over decades or even centuries. Admiral Peter Stone disagreed strongly. He commanded Earth's deep space fleet. He pointed out that waiting would not solve the fundamental problem. If Patricia Hayes was right, the Council would eventually move against humanity, regardless of what Earth did. At least with the Defiance, humanity had leverage. They had proof that humans could build technology equal to anything the Council possessed. That was a powerful negotiating position. General Cross shot back that leverage was useless if it made you a target. He argued that revealing the Defiance would be seen as a direct threat. The Council would respond with overwhelming force. They would crush Earth before humanity could build more ships like the Defiance. It would be suicide. Christine listened to the arguments go back and forth. Finally, she cleared her throat and everyone fell silent. She had been analyzing the Defiance's capabilities against known Council fleet compositions. She had run simulations using every tactical database Earth possessed. Her conclusion was clear. Ship for ship, the Defiance was superior to anything the Council had. It carried more weapons. It had better shields. Its engines were more powerful. The question was not whether humanity could fight. The question was whether humanity should fight. President Marsh leaned forward and asked Christine directly for her recommendation. Christine took a deep breath. She proposed that they reveal the Defiance at the Council Summit in 3 days, but not as a threat, as a statement. They would show the Council that humanity had developed beyond their expectations, that humans had advanced beyond the limits the Council tried to impose, that Earth demanded to be treated as equals, not as children who needed constant supervision. General Cross called the plan incredibly risky. Christine agreed that it was risky, but she argued that doing nothing was even riskier. Humanity had been playing by the Council's rules for 200 years. What had it gotten them? Humans were still restricted to a handful of star systems, still dependent on Council technology for faster-than-light travel, still treated as primitive newcomers who should be grateful for protection. Patricia Hayes and her team had seen this coming 300 years ago. They had built the Defiance to give humanity a choice. Christine said it was time to take that choice. The room fell into silence as everyone considered the implications. The decision they made in this room would determine the future of the entire human species. They could stay safe and controlled under Council rule, or they could risk everything for a chance at true independence. President Marsh looked around the table at each of her advisors. Then she nodded slowly. She gave the order to bring the Defiance to Earth. She told Christine to prepare to present the ship to the Council at the summit. She ended the meeting by saying that God helped them all because they were about to change everything. 2 days later, the Defiance entered Earth orbit. Despite all attempts at secrecy, the news leaked within hours. Every communication network on Earth began broadcasting footage of the mysterious ship. People everywhere stopped what they were doing to watch. Speculation spread like wildfire across the planet. Some people thought it was a hoax created with computer graphics. Others wondered if it was alien technology that had been captured in secret. A few conspiracy theorists came surprisingly close to the truth. On the bridge of the Defiance, Christine stood with Jake and his crew. They looked down at Earth through the main view screen. The ship hummed with power around them. Every weapon system had been armed. Every shield generator was at full capacity. The engines were primed and ready. Amy reported that the Council fleet was moving into position around Earth. 10 capital ships from 4 different species had arrived in the system. They were maintaining a defensive formation but had not powered up their weapons yet. The Council was clearly surprised by the Defiance's appearance. They were trying to assess the threat level before deciding how to respond. Christine gave the order for all crew to report to battle stations. She was not looking for a fight, but she wanted everyone to be ready in case the Council decided to attack. The Defiance's systems flared to life at full power. Across the solar system, sensors registered the massive energy signature. Every ship and station within range detected it. The Galactic Council was about to learn something important. Their newest members had teeth, and humanity was no longer willing to keep those teeth hidden. The Council chamber hung in orbit above Earth like a monument to ancient power. The Valorians had built it 12,000 years ago when they first established the Galactic Council. The massive structure could hold representatives from all 47 member species. The founding races occupied elevated thrones that ringed the top of the chamber. From those thrones they looked down on everyone else. The design was intentional. It reminded younger species of their place in the galactic order. Admiral Christine Palmer walked down the long aisle toward the speaker's platform. She could feel thousands of eyes watching her from all directions. Above her head, holographic screens displayed images of the Defiance rotating slowly in space. The ship dominated every view. It was impossible to ignore. That was exactly what Christine wanted. High Chancellor Veridax spoke first. He was the leader of the Valorian Empire and the most powerful individual in the Council. His voice had a strange crystalline quality that carried easily through the chamber. He addressed Christine formally and noted that the Council was prepared to hear her statement. But he also mentioned with obvious displeasure the unauthorized military vessel currently in Earth's orbit. Christine reached the platform and activated her personal holographic display. Documents and data files appeared in the air around her. She looked up at Chancellor Veridax and said that unauthorized was an interesting word choice. The Defiance was a human ship. It had been built by humans using human resources. She asked by what authority it would require council approval. The chamber erupted into noise. Representatives from dozens of species began shouting objections. Councillor Thex of the Krill hierarchy leaned forward from his throne. His species looked like massive insects with crystalline armor. He pointed out that the protection accords signed by Earth 200 years ago were very clear. Article 7 stated that military development beyond approved parameters required council oversight. Humans had agreed to these terms when they joined the council. Christine replied calmly that she had read Article 7 very carefully. She had also read the classified sections that were never shown to protected species. The sections that detailed exactly how the council had systematically prevented 17 previous civilizations from advancing beyond predetermined limits. The sections that showed the council's true purpose was not protection, but control. The noise in the chamber became deafening. Representatives demanded proof. Others called for Christine to be removed from the chamber for making such serious accusations. Some demanded that Earth be sanctioned immediately for building unauthorized weapons. Chancellor Veridax raised one of his long arms and the chamber fell silent instantly. The power of his position was absolute. Christine expanded her holographic display. The air filled with documents, communications logs, financial records, and historical analysis. She began listing specific examples. The Zentari quantum computing breakthrough in the year 4523 of council dating. 7 lead scientists had died in what was officially called an accident. But Christine showed autopsy reports that indicated sophisticated poisoning. She showed communications between council security officials discussing the need to eliminate the Zentari research team before they made further progress. She moved to the next example. The Krolesh economic collapse in the year 6891. Official reports blamed poor financial management by Krolesh leadership. But Christine displayed transaction records showing how 3 separate council banking institutions had manipulated currency markets to deliberately crash the Krolesh economy. The manipulation had occurred immediately after the Krolesh began expanding their military fleet beyond approved limits. Then she brought up the Viridians. Their entire military fleet had vanished in the year 8104 during what was supposed to be a routine patrol. The official explanation was a navigation system failure that caused the ships to jump into a star. But Christine showed sensor data that Patricia Hayes had recovered. The data showed weapons fire. It showed council ships in the area where the Viridian fleet had disappeared. It showed a cover-up that had lasted for thousands of years. Christine turned to address the entire chamber. She said that this pattern had repeated 17 times. 17 species had shown too much promise. 17 species had developed too quickly. 17 species had refused to accept permanent inferior status. And 17 times the council had intervened to ensure the existing power structure remained unchanged. Councillor Thex stood up from his throne. His voice was angry as he declared that this was classified council security information. He demanded to know how humanity had obtained access to sealed databases. He said that Christine should not possess any of this material. Christine smiled coldly. She explained that Patricia Hayes and her team had obtained this information 3 centuries ago. They had been skilled enough to break into council systems that were supposed to be impenetrable. They had seen what was coming for humanity. They had understood that protected species status was not a gift, but a cage. So they had built the Defiance as humanity's declaration that they would not accept that cage. Chancellor Veridax remained silent for a long moment. His crystalline features were difficult to read, but Christine thought she detected something like grudging respect. He asked what exactly humanity proposed. Did Earth expect the Council to simply accept this violation of established law? Did humans think they could deploy advanced military technology without consequences? Christine took a deep breath. This was the critical moment. She proposed that the Council end the entire system of protected species status. Humanity was ready for full membership with equal standing, equal rights, and equal responsibilities. The Defiance proved that humans had advanced beyond the artificial limits the Council had tried to impose. Instead of punishing that achievement, the Council should recognize it and accept Earth as a true partner. Counselor Thex said that was impossible. The graduation process from protected to full status took centuries of careful evaluation. Humanity had barely existed on the galactic stage. Earth was not ready for the responsibilities that came with full membership. Jake Morrison's voice came through Christine's earpiece. He was monitoring the situation from the Defiance. He reported that 3 Council ships had just activated their weapon systems. The readings showed Krill and Valorian signatures. The ships were not yet targeting anything, but they were clearly preparing for combat. Christine did not let her expression change. She stood very still and spoke clearly. She recommended that Chancellor Veridax order those ships to stand down. The Defiance was fully operational and crewed by some of humanity's best officers. Christine said that humans had come to the summit to talk, not to fight. But they were prepared for either option. She let that statement hang in the air like a threat. Chancellor Veridax stood up from his throne. His massive form cast long shadows across the speaker's platform. But when he spoke, his words surprised everyone in the chamber. He said that Christine had misunderstood the situation. The Council ships were not preparing to attack Earth. They were responding to a genuine external threat that had nothing to do with humanity or the current political discussion. The main holographic display shifted to show deep space sensor readings. A massive fleet was approaching Council territory. The readings showed hundreds of ships in tight formation. The configuration did not match anything in the known database. These were not Council vessels. They were not from any recognized species. They were completely unknown. Veridax explained that Council long-range sensors had detected this fleet 3 hours ago. Analysis suggested they were not from any civilization that the Council had previous contact with. The unknown fleet had already destroyed 2 automated monitoring stations. They had ignored all attempts at communication. Based on their current trajectory and speed, they would reach Earth's solar system within 12 hours. Christine felt her blood turn to ice. She asked if Veridax was saying that Earth was about to be invaded by an unknown force. The timing seemed impossibly convenient. She wondered briefly if this was some kind of elaborate trick to distract from the political confrontation. But Veridax's next words eliminated that suspicion. He said that the Council had been tracking this unknown fleet for months. They had been approaching from outside known space. They seemed to be searching for something. 3 hours ago, they had suddenly changed course and accelerated directly toward Earth's system. The Council did not know why. They did not know what these unknowns wanted. But they knew the fleet represented a serious threat to everyone in the region. Veridax looked directly at Christine. He said that whatever political disagreements existed between Earth and the Council would have to wait. The galaxy was facing a threat that made internal politics irrelevant. The unknown fleet had already demonstrated hostile intent by destroying Council property. They were heading for Earth with clear purpose. The question was whether humanity would stand with the Council against this threat or continue their confrontation while enemies approached from outside. Christine looked up at the display showing the approaching red markers of the unknown fleet. She had come to this summit ready to fight the Council for humanity's freedom. She had prepared arguments and strategies for a political battle. Now the universe had thrown a completely different kind of battle at them, a battle for survival rather than status. She touched her communication device and spoke quietly to Jake. She asked for the Defiance's current combat readiness. Jake reported that all systems were fully operational. They could deploy for combat operations within 30 minutes. Every weapon was armed. Every system was ready. The crew was waiting for orders. Christine looked back at Chancellor Veridax. She said that humanity would stand with the Council. Earth would help defend against this unknown threat. But she made it clear that when the battle was over, they would finish the conversation about humanity's status, and they would finish it as equals who had fought side by side, not as children being protected by adults. For the first time, Veridax's crystalline features showed something that looked like genuine respect. He agreed to Christine's terms. Then he opened a general channel to all Council military forces. He announced that the Earth vessel Defiance was authorized to join the defensive fleet. He ordered tactical frequencies and combat protocols to be transmitted to the human ship immediately. As Christine left the chamber, she could not help but think about Patricia Hayes. The woman had built the Defiance to fight for humanity's independence. Instead, the ship would first fight for humanity's survival. Christine wondered if Patricia had somehow known this day would come. The Defiance had been hidden for 300 years. Now it would finally show the galaxy what it could do. The unknown fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel. At the edge of Earth's solar system, and every sensor in human and council space screamed warnings at the same time. 300 vessels appeared in tight formation. Each ship was massive and covered in strange geometric patterns that hurt the eyes to look at. Energy readings pulsed from their hulls in colors that should not exist in normal space. They moved with perfect coordination toward the inner system where Earth waited. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Christine Palmer stood at the main tactical display with Captain Jake Morrison and his crew around her. Through the view screen, she could see the combined defensive fleet taking up positions. 40 Council warships from a dozen different species spread out in a protective line. 12 Earth defense vessels moved to support them. And in the center of the formation, the Defiance held position like an anchor. One ship built in secret 300 years ago now stood ready to defend humanity's home. Christine ordered Lieutenant Amy Carter to give her a full tactical analysis of the approaching enemy. Amy's fingers moved rapidly across her console as the sensors gathered data. She reported that the unknown ships had hull compositions unlike anything in the database. The energy signatures were completely off the scale. They were not using any known form of propulsion. It was something entirely different. Amy counted weapon ports covering every surface of each enemy vessel. She estimated that each unknown ship had roughly the same firepower as a Council dreadnought. Commander Lucas Bennett let out a low whistle. He did the math quickly in his head. 300 ships with dreadnought-level firepower against 52 Allied vessels. They were outnumbered almost 7-1. Those were terrible odds by any standard of warfare. Christine said quietly that they would need to be 7 times smarter than the enemy to survive. She ordered communications to continue attempting contact with the unknown fleet. The communications officer worked his station frantically but kept getting the same result. The unknown ships were not responding to any hails. They maintained complete silence as they advanced steadily toward Earth. Suddenly, the communications officer called out that he was detecting a transmission from the unknown fleet. But it was not directed at the human and Council forces. The enemy was broadcasting a signal into deep space. The encryption was completely unlike anything they had seen before. There was no way to decode it with current technology. Jake moved closer to the display and studied the readings. He said that the unknowns were calling for reinforcements. This was not the main invasion force. It was just a scouting group. The real fleet was probably still out in deep space waiting to see what happened here. The implications hit Christine like a physical blow. If 300 ships was just the advance guard, how many more were waiting out there? How large was the full force they would eventually face? She pushed those thoughts aside. Right now, she had to focus on surviving the next few hours. Worrying about tomorrow would not help if they all died today. Christine opened a channel to all Allied ships. She designated the unknown fleet as Hostile Unknown 01. She authorized full engagement protocols. She told every captain in the defensive line to show these invaders what happened when they threatened Earth and Council space. The Council fleet moved first. Capital ships from the Valorian Empire, the Krill hierarchy, and 10 other species opened fire simultaneously. Energy weapons in a dozen different colors painted space with brilliant light. Missiles streaked across the void, trailing fire. Kinetic rounds moved at incredible speeds toward their targets. The unknown vessels responded with brutal efficiency. Their weapon systems activated and beams of coherent energy sliced through Council shields as if they were made of paper. A Valorian cruiser took a direct hit and exploded in seconds. A Krill destroyer simply stopped existing as it was atomized by a weapon that nobody had seen before. In the first 30 seconds of combat, 5 Council ships were destroyed completely. Amy's voice was tight with stress as she reported that the unknown ships were adapting to every attack. Each time the Council forces fired a particular weapon, the enemy shields adjusted to defend against that specific energy signature. The second time that same weapon was used, it was only half as effective. The third time, it barely left a mark. The unknowns were learning and evolving their defenses in real time during combat. Christine gripped the railing in front of her. The Council fleet was being slaughtered. Their weapons were becoming useless as the enemy adapted. At this rate, the entire defensive line would collapse within minutes. She made her decision instantly. She ordered the Defiance to move forward into combat. She told the helm to take them directly into the fight. She told weapons to prepare to show these invaders what humanity was capable of. The Defiance surged forward on its massive engines. It moved past the retreating Council vessels and directly toward the enemy formation. Jake watched the tactical display update as targeting computers locked onto dozens of unknown ships simultaneously. Every weapon system on the Defiance came online at once. Railguns loaded tungsten rounds, plasma batteries charged to full power, missile pods armed their seekers. Laser arrays focused their deadly light. The weapons officer reported that firing solutions were locked for all primary batteries. Everything was ready. Christine gave the order to fire with every weapon they had. The Defiance spoke with thunder. Railguns launched solid projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. Plasma batteries painted targeting patterns across space with superheated matter. Missile pods deployed hundreds of seekers, each carrying penetration warheads designed by Patricia Hayes 3 centuries ago. Laser arrays cut through the void with focused energy. Every weapon system fired in perfect coordination. The lead unknown vessel staggered under the massive assault. Its shields flared bright and then buckled under the sustained bombardment. Hull plating cracked and split open. Secondary explosions rippled across its surface. For the first time since the battle began, one of the invaders showed serious damage. Every captain in the Allied fleet saw it happen. High Chancellor Veridax's voice came across all frequencies. He ordered every ship to concentrate fire on the damaged enemy vessel. He told them to focus their attacks and not give the unknown shields time to adapt. The Council fleet rallied at his words. Dozens of ships poured weapons fire into the wounded unknown. Under the combined assault, its shields collapsed completely. More explosions tore through its hull. The ship listed dead in space, its systems failing, but the unknown fleet was already responding to this new threat. 20 vessels broke from the main formation. They accelerated hard directly toward the Defiance with obvious hostile intent. They had identified the human ship as the primary danger and were moving to eliminate it. Jake ordered evasive maneuvers. The helm officer sent the massive Defiance into a series of combat turns that should have been impossible for something so large. Amy worked frantically at her console trying to find any weakness in the enemy ships. She analyzed every sensor reading. She compared shield frequencies and weapon signatures. Finally, she found something useful. Amy reported that the enemy shields adapted to specific energy signatures, but there was a delay in the process. It took exactly 0.3 seconds for the shields to recalibrate after being hit with a new weapon type. If they could hit the unknowns with multiple different weapons in rapid sequence, the shields would not have time to adapt to each one before the next attack arrived. Christine understood immediately. She ordered weapons to set up a rotation pattern. Plasma weapons first, then railguns, then missiles, then lasers. Cycle through every weapon type they had in rapid succession. Do not give the enemy shields time to adapt to any single attack. The Defiance moved through the enemy formation like a dancer, despite its enormous size. Weapons fired in precise sequence exactly as ordered. Plasma struck first and burned through shields. Before the shields could adapt, railgun rounds punched through the weakened defenses. Before they recovered, missiles detonated against bare hull. Before repairs could begin, lasers cut deep into vital systems. 2 unknown vessels fell to this rotating attack pattern, then 3 more. Then 5. Lucas reported that the Council fleet was copying their tactics. Ships throughout the Allied formation were diversifying their attacks and cycling through different weapon types. It was working. The pace of destruction slowed. The unknowns were still dangerous, but they were no longer invincible. The battle was becoming more even, but the mathematics of warfare were merciless. For every unknown vessel destroyed, the enemy fleet pushed closer to Earth. They were taking casualties, but they kept advancing, and long-range sensors were detecting something worse. Amy reported it with quiet dread in her voice. 50 more unknown vessels were approaching, reinforcements responding to the signal the scouts had sent. They would arrive in 20 minutes. Christine looked at Jake and saw the same calculation in his eyes. They could hold for a while longer. They could keep fighting, but eventually the numbers would overwhelm them. The unknowns would break through the defensive line. They would reach Earth. And there was nothing the combined human and Council forces could do to stop it. Christine stared at the tactical display, looking for anything they had missed. There had to be some weakness they could exploit, some vulnerability they had not yet discovered. She refused to accept that humanity would survive for thousands of years only to be destroyed by an enemy they did not even understand. Then Jake said something that made her look up sharply. He said the unknowns were coordinated too perfectly. They responded too quickly to threats. They maneuvered with too much precision. No fleet operated with this level of synchronization unless they were all being controlled by a single command center. If they could identify and destroy that central command vessel, the rest of the fleet might lose coordination. Amy was already scanning before Christine could give the order. Her eyes moved rapidly across her displays as she filtered through sensor data. Finally, she pointed at one vessel in the fourth tier of the enemy formation. It was broadcasting on frequencies that the other unknowns were not using. If that was the command ship controlling the entire fleet, then destroying it might break their coordination completely. Christine made her decision in seconds. She ordered the helm to plot a direct course through the enemy formation to that command vessel. Lucas protested immediately. He said it was suicide. They would be surrounded by enemies on all sides. Christine said they were already surrounded and the situation was only getting worse. At least this way they were taking action instead of slowly dying. She opened a channel to all allied ships. She told them the Defiance was making a run on the suspected enemy command vessel. The human ship would draw enemy fire. She asked the Council fleet to use that opening to press their attack. This was humanity's gamble. This was their chance to turn the battle. Chancellor Veridax responded across the same channel. He said it was a bold strategy. The Council fleet would support the assault. He ended with words that sounded like a prayer in his crystalline voice. Christine looked at her crew. She said she hoped Patricia Hayes was watching from wherever the dead go. The helm officer acknowledged the order and pushed the engines to maximum. The Defiance accelerated into the heart of the unknown fleet, ready to show them what 300 years of human determination looked like. The Defiance drove deep into the heart of the unknown fleet like a spear aimed at a vital organ. Enemy fire converged from every direction. Energy beams hammered against the shields with relentless force. The shield generators strained under the assault, and warning lights flashed across every console on the bridge. Damage reports flooded in from all sections of the ship. Hull breaches on decks 12 through 15, shield generators failing on the port side, weapon batteries offline along the starboard flank. But the Defiance kept moving forward through the storm of fire. The crew kept fighting with the desperation of people who knew this might be their last battle. Jake watched the tactical display as the distance to the enemy command vessel decreased. 5,000 kilometers, 4,000, 3,000. They were close enough now to see the strange pulsing lights that covered its hull. The command ship was larger than the other unknown vessels, and its geometric patterns were more complex, more disturbing to look at, but it was also concentrating fire on the Defiance now. It recognized the threat approaching. Christine stood at the center of the bridge and watched her ship take damage. Every explosion that tore through the hull was felt through the deck plating. Every system that went offline reduced their chances of survival. She knew they might not make it back from this attack run. The mathematics were simple and brutal. But if they could take out that command vessel, if they could break the enemy coordination, then maybe the rest of the fleet would survive. Maybe Earth would be saved. That was worth any sacrifice. The weapons officer called out that they had reached optimal firing range. All remaining weapon systems were locked onto the command vessel. Every functional battery was charged and ready. Everything the Defiance had left was aimed at one target. Christine gave the order to fire everything. Hold nothing back. This was their one chance. The Defiance unleashed every weapon that still worked. Railguns fired until their barrels glowed red hot. Plasma batteries dumped their entire charge in continuous beams. Missile pods launched every seeker they had left. Laser arrays focused all their power on single points. The accumulated firepower of Patricia Hayes' masterpiece poured into the enemy command vessel in one sustained barrage that lit up space like a second sun. The command ship's shields held for 2 seconds, then 3, then 4. Christine counted each second in her head and wondered if they had enough firepower left to break through. Then suddenly the shields collapsed under the sustained assault. The hull beneath was exposed to the full fury of the Defiance's weapons. Explosions rippled across the command vessel's surface. Its geometric patterns flickered and died. Secondary detonations cascaded through its interior as critical systems failed. The command ship began to break apart. For one brief moment, everything in the battle seemed to pause. Both sides watched as the enemy command vessel tore itself apart in a series of massive explosions. Debris spread outward in an expanding cloud. Then across the entire unknown fleet, something fundamental changed. The perfect coordination vanished. Ships that had moved with mechanical precision began making erratic maneuvers. Some started firing on each other as if they could no longer tell friend from enemy. Others simply stopped moving and drifted dead in space. A few turned and fled back toward deep space. Amy's voice was full of disbelief as she reported what the sensors were showing. The unknown fleet had lost all command and control. Without the central vessel directing them, they were confused and unable to function as a coordinated force. The threat was breaking apart before their eyes. The Council fleet saw the same thing and pressed their advantage immediately. Ships that had been retreating moments before now advanced. They targeted the confused unknown vessels with renewed determination. One by one, the enemy ships fell or fled. The perfect formation that had seemed unstoppable just minutes ago dissolved into chaos. When it was finally over, the Defiance hung in space above Earth, battered and scarred, but still intact. Fires burned in several sections. Hull plating was missing in dozens of places. Half the weapon systems were offline, but the ship was still flying. The crew was still alive, and Earth was safe. Christine slumped into the command chair and felt 300 years of history pressing down on her shoulders. Patricia Hayes had built this ship to defend humanity. Today it had done exactly that. She asked Lucas for a casualty report. His voice was quiet as he gave her the numbers. 17 Council ships had been completely destroyed. 8 more were heavily damaged and would need months of repairs. Human losses were lighter, with 2 destroyers gone and damage across the remaining fleet. But they had held the line. Earth remained untouched by the battle that had raged around it. Through the main view screen, Christine could see Earth turning slowly below them. 8 billion human lives had no idea how close they had come to destruction. They would learn eventually. The news networks were already broadcasting footage of the battle. But for now they were safe. That was all that mattered. Christine opened a communication channel to High Chancellor Veridax. His crystalline features appeared on her screen. He looked tired in a way that Christine had never seen from a Valorian before. But there was something else in his expression. Respect. Real respect from one warrior to another. He said that the Council owed humanity a debt that could never be fully repaid. The Defiance and her crew had turned the tide of battle when all seemed lost. Christine said that they had fought to defend their home. But they had fought alongside the Council as equals. That was all humanity had ever wanted. To stand as partners rather than children. To be judged by their actions rather than their age as a species. Veridax was silent for a long moment. Then he said that the Council would reconvene in 3 days. There were matters to discuss. Important matters regarding humanity's status. He ended the call before Christine could respond. 3 days later, the Council chamber was filled again. But the atmosphere was completely different from the last meeting. Representatives who had looked at humans with disdain now watched with cautious respect. The holographic displays showed footage from the battle. They showed the Defiance charging into the enemy fleet. They showed the destruction of the command vessel. They showed humanity proving their worth in the most definitive way possible. Christine walked down the aisle with Jake, Lucas, and Amy beside her. They were veterans now, battle-tested. They had faced an unknown enemy and emerged victorious. No one could question their capability after what they had done. Chancellor Veridax stood as they reached the platform. He addressed Christine formally, but there was warmth in his crystalline voice that had not been there before. He said the Council had debated extensively over the past 3 days. They had examined the historical evidence Christine had presented. They had confronted uncomfortable truths about their treatment of protected species, and they had watched humans fight with courage that could not be denied. Councillor Thex rose from his throne. The insect-like krill representative spoke carefully. He admitted that the evidence of Council manipulation was disturbing. If the principles of mutual advancement had been corrupted as the record suggested, then those failings needed to be addressed honestly. Veridax continued. He said the Council was proposing a new framework. Not protected status with its limitations, but provisional full membership. Humanity would keep complete control over military development, territorial expansion, and their own destiny. In exchange, Earth would accept the responsibilities of Council membership. defending collective security, participating in governance, sharing knowledge and resources for the common good. Christine felt hope rising in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. She asked about the other protected species throughout Council space. What would happen to them under this new system? Veridax said that each species would be re-evaluated fairly. Those who demonstrated readiness would be offered the same opportunity as humanity. The era of permanent protected status was ending. The Council could no longer justify maintaining a system that held species back from their full potential. Jake spoke up from beside Christine. He said with respect that the Council was only doing this because they had no other choice. The unknown fleet had proven the galaxy was more dangerous than they had believed. The Council needed allies who could actually fight rather than dependents who required constant protection. The chamber fell silent at his directness. Then surprisingly, Veridax laughed. The crystalline sound echoed through the space. He said that Jake's honesty was refreshing. The captain was not entirely wrong. Practical necessity was certainly part of the decision. The unknown fleet represented a threat that nobody fully understood. They had called for reinforcements before their command structure was destroyed. More would come eventually. The Council needed every capable ally they could find. But Veridax said that Jake was also not entirely right. Fighting beside humanity had reminded the Council of something important. That potential mattered more than age. That courage and capability could not be measured by how long a species had existed. Humanity had earned full membership the moment the Defiance fired its first shot in defense of not just Earth, but the entire Council. Counselor Thex added that there would be conditions. Full disclosure of the Defiance's technology to be shared among all Council members, regular military exercises with Council forces, human representatives participating in Council intelligence and security operations to prepare for future threats. Christine agreed to share the Defiance's technology. But she made clear that Earth retained the right to continue developing new innovations independently. They would participate in Council defense but would not surrender their sovereignty. Any intelligence sharing would be reciprocal, with Earth getting full access to Council information. Veridax accepted those terms. He said that was what equals did. They negotiated. They compromised. They worked together. He raised his arm in a formal Valorian gesture and spoke words that would change galactic history. The Council recognized Earth and humanity as provisional full members, effective immediately. The chamber erupted in noise, but most of it was supportive. Christine felt the weight of 300 years of planning and sacrifice settling on her shoulders. Patricia Hayes had gambled everything on this moment. She had committed treason. She had built weapons in secret. She had left future generations with an impossible choice, and somehow impossibly it had worked. As they left the chamber, Amy pulled out her datapad. She had been analyzing data captured from the destroyed command vessel. She said quietly that she had partially decoded the signal the unknowns had sent before they were destroyed. It was not just a call for reinforcements. It was a targeting solution marking Earth's location as a high-priority threat. Whatever was coming next would be coming specifically for humanity. The group fell silent. Their victory suddenly felt less certain. They had won their freedom from Council control, but they had also painted a target on Earth that could be seen from across the galaxy. Christine looked up at the stars beyond the Council chamber. She said that they would need to be ready. Patricia had built one supercarrier in secret. Now humanity would build more with the full resources of Earth and the Council behind them. When the unknowns returned, they would discover what Patricia Hayes had known 3 centuries ago. That humanity did not surrender. That humans did not quit. That when pushed into a corner, they would fight with everything they had. 3 months later, construction began on new supercarriers in orbital yards above Earth. Council engineers worked with human designers. Technologies that had been kept separate for centuries were now shared freely. The unknown fleet had not returned yet, but deep space probes were detecting movement far out in the void, massive formations gathering, preparing. On the Defiance's bridge, Christine reviewed deployment schedules. Through the view screen, Earth turned peacefully. She touched a console and a message appeared. 2 lines of text using encryption that had been obsolete for 300 years. A message that should not exist. It said that she had done well. That the fight was only beginning. That there were 7 more ships hidden and waiting. That humanity would need them all. It was signed with 2 letters. P and H. Christine stared at those letters for a long time. Patricia Hayes had been dead for 300 years, but somehow she had left one final gift. 7 more supercarriers waiting to be found. 7 more weapons for the war that was coming. Christine smiled and began giving orders. They would find those ships. They would build even more. And when the unknown enemy returned, humanity would be ready. The age of protection was over. The age of humanity had just begun.